My name is Joe Palermo, and in the realms of what we're going to be talking about, I consider myself a paranormalist. My research probably would have started with the UFO sighting I had when I was 14. I believe that was the summer of 72. And I was old enough that it made that kind of impression on me that I wanted to learn everything I could about UFOs. I spent a lot of time at the public library, and I was in junior high at the time, so I spent time in the junior high library. And, because that was, as opposed to today jumping online, that was the major source of any sort of information I might have gotten. I'm not sure I was around open-minded people. I just didn't care what they thought. Excuse me. I remember, telling my mom about this and her just kind of fluffing it off. But at some point, I don't know whether she did or my Uncle Bob did, her brother. But the topic came up and I was told about an encounter that they had in Fort Worth, Texas. It was a summer day, a summer afternoon, and they were all gathered at Grandma and Grandpa's house, like they would of a summer evening, and sitting on the porch, and they said, all of a sudden they're looking up and they're seeing apparently this disc-type craft had come from behind the house, but silently just sailed over, and they saw it come over the roof of the house and just kept going. And they just thought, well, how about that? Because, it didn't stop, it didn't land, and no, as Ted Phillips would say, no critters got out or anything. It just sailed over. So it's like, so my mom's side of the family had an experience. Interesting. Well, it probably the best way to answer that is to say that it was a cumulative effect, because I had had experiences in infanthood, if I can use that as a term. That's where I had probably my first UFO sighting anyway, maybe experience. And I'm going to guess 3 years old. We lived above the tavern that my parents owned and serviced back in that would have been like 1961. Our tavern was right off of left field of Sportsman's Park in St. Louis, city of St. Louis. And it was a warm evening, I remember that. We had the window open. It may have been pre-daylight savings time because it was kind of twilight. It wasn't completely dark. But as a child, I'm there at the window and I see this black, shiny car, for a 3-year-old's mind, down curbside. And I'm looking down and all of a sudden this sucker starts lifting straight up in the air. And I had a favorite TV program at the time called Supercar, which was one of Jerry Anderson's marionette puppet shows. And that's all I could relate it to. So I'm saying, Mom, Dad, supercar. And they're over on the couch. What I would later in ufology discover the term switched off, did quiet. And you have to understand that at that time, it was a Sunday night, Bonanza was on, and if I had interrupted their TV viewing, I'd have gotten a chewing out. Nothing from them. Nothing. And this thing came up, went past the window, probably cleared the roof of the tavern, rotated towards the east, and sailed off over the stadium. And about the time it got out of sight, these guys became reanimated. And a real interesting thing that happened there, and again, under normal conditions, it would have been, hon, I'm hungry, go make me a sandwich. Whereas what happened here was they both expressed a hunger They both got up off the couch and went to the kitchen to get something. So they weren't behaving normal. So that would have actually been, that, and then the UFO sighting when I was 14, kind of connected. And of course, at that time, in the local media, we had a lot going on with Piedmont, Missouri, going on, the UFOs in the news, and cattle mutilations going on in Ellsbury, Missouri, and we hadn't yet been experiencing Momo, but the
what's Momo?
Momo standing for Missouri Monster, which is a Bigfoot type creature. That wouldn't happen until just a little bit later, but we were exposed to a similar Bigfoot creature out of Fouke, Arkansas, because of the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek was out at that time. So that kind of got the Bigfoot fever going, so to speak. So all of that, being old enough to start reading, and not that I only started reading when I was 14, but it just hit at that time that there was enough material out there to start, got this mind curious and wanting answers.
Well, top of your head, how many different experiences or encounters do you think you might have had with UFOs?
With UFOs? Probably more than my share. Let's see. Infant, 14, August of 77, I was in DeSoto, Missouri, and watched two lit objects chase each other in dogfight fashion across the horizon. Moving forward, there was a case, and at this point, I was already part of the UFO study group of Greater St. Louis and part of Missouri MUFON. Went on a case where this red, dull glowing object rose above a neighbor's. Well, I won't even say a neighbor's. We were alerted to this red object that was being seen mid-Missouri someplace. I don't remember where it was exactly. And the late Walter Palmer and I went out as the study group representatives, and off of a highway, I'm going to guess it may have been a mile and a half, 2 miles off the highway across, because we're in nowhere land, somebody's ranch property, farm property, whatever. But off in the distance, you could make out the structure of the barn or the garage or whatever it was. And I guess for these folks, just like clockwork, this red object rose above it and just sat there. And I tried to take pictures of it. They didn't turn out. Had kind of an interesting experience. A friend of mine, my Reiki master, Chris Scheibe, we had just come back from eating out or something. And she'd made the comment right then and there that, she really wished she could see a UFO. And as soon as the words came off of her lips, I'm going to say it was probably 30 feet in the air near the top of a tree at the corner of my property. Now, this was not 4th of July, nowhere near 4th of July, but something like a Roman candle type sparks shot from the top of the tree out over her car and was gone. And she about went in her pants. And I said, be careful of what you ask for. So 5, 6, maybe more sightings. I don't know. I've kind of lost track. I've had more than my share. Encounter of the third kind. I don't recall being outside of the craft when I was very small, because I could definitely see the layers of curvature to it and the shiny blackness and all that. But as far as seeing that kind of detail in another craft, no. Now, if we go further into close encounter of the fourth kind with encounters with some sort of beings, I do believe that I've had that. And I don't know if it was an abduction experience or if it was just an encounter with them in the house. But
Tell me about it.
I'm trying to remember it was after I was in my apartment. I was back taking care of Mom at the time, so it was at her house. I'm gonna guess late 80s, maybe. And I'd gone to bed. I was sleeping in the living room on the couch. And I remember a waking memory of standing in the middle of the living room, looking out towards the front yard and seeing what seemed like 8 shadowy figures scurrying towards the front of the house. And I remember feeling abject terror and turning towards the inside of the house, heading towards the dining room and wanting to scream. My next memory is a bunch of what might typically be described as spindly arms under my backside, probably from my upper back on down to my legs. And I don't know if I was being put back on the couch or them trying to take me off the couch. I don't know which it was. But I do remember the most distinct part of that encounter was my martial arts training kicked in, and when I realized something was touching me, I went to do a back fist. And when I went to back fist, I got that far and my arm froze, like I was prevented from hitting anything. And the more I pushed, the more paralysis occurred. So when I got tired and relaxed, and the intent was not to hit anymore, paralysis went away. But it didn't prevent my arm from falling forward and running down the right arm of one of these things. And I remembered that there was texture to it. It felt like a frog. I couldn't say scaly necessarily, but very delicate, textured. It wasn't smooth, it was textured, and a little bit clammy. That's the only thing of that nature that I could say for sure that happened to me. Now, interestingly enough, I believe that I had been involved in 2 other cases where the people I was with were taken. One was in, I want to say 1991. I'd been on a Skywatch, a MUFON Skywatch, Missouri MUFON Skywatch, with some friends, and I know there was missing time involved with that one. My sister Mary Boyer was into practicing the Silva method, which is back in the early 70s, they would have referred to as kind of a form of mind control, not on other people, but where you train your mind to be able to do things. And, excuse me, she did a regression on me in that particular case. And now some people may think, well, you're probing the mind with hypnosis, this could have been suggested and all that. But I can assure anybody that the details that came out were not suggested. The only thing that my sister ever said was, what's happening now? What happens next? Those are not leading statements or questions. That's simply saying, okay, now what? And that was the first time that I was I kind of intellectually knew it beforehand, but that was the first time that I had actually experienced the concept that consciousness does not know any boundaries. Consciousness doesn't know time or space. It just simply is. And I was able to go to that time frame and send my consciousness to follow what happened to the person that was taken out of the car with us, which was very interesting. She was taken to a landed vehicle somewhere in the woods. I don't know for sure where, but and led up a ramp that led into this. It was kind of on, I don't want to say tripod legs exactly, but there were 3 sections to this craft. It looked about the size of a small house from the outside, but in going in, it was much more vast in space on the interior. That kind of, well, paradox is probably the wrong word, but that kind of unreality where, okay, from the outside, you perceive it this size, like the size of the cup. But if you go inside, it's the size of the table on the inside. Very odd time and space situation.
Would you say it would be more of a dimensional shift?
That's a good question. Well, then we fall into the issue of trying to describe exactly what a dimension is. I just know that there was something more on the inside of the expected perimeter than more space than there should have been. I don't know. I wouldn't liken it to a dimensional shift necessarily, because to me a dimensional shift well, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. See, now you got me going quiet because my brain is working with the question, trying to figure out okay, well, if we look at it from this standpoint, then this could be, and then this is like, no, I don't have time to go into that right now.
No, I wasn't trying to throw you off, but
no, but it's a good question.
Considering, if you take the I don't necessarily like to use the word, but the new age approach to things, understanding dimensions more, it would certainly seem that it would be going from one dimension to another, where an object on the outside may appear small, but much different once you make the change, once you shift over to the next dimension. Right. But
it's entirely possible. Oh, just for record's sake and documenting sake, this is December 8th, I believe.
Yes.
December 8th of 2013 that we're doing this. So the documentarian in me.
Thanks for throwing that out.
Primarily the things that have occurred to me. September of 76, I had what has more firmly been entrenched in my mind now is an encounter with, let's say, a people of the woods, as one of my colleagues, Shaldian, and I are now referring to these Sasquatch or Bigfoot beings. That was very interesting. That happened in Creve Coeur Park, September 14th and 15th of 1976. And on my end, it was kind of a fleeting glance, but I did have a witness with me. In fact, there were 2 instances. September 14th, 76, at about 10:20 p.m., it was myself and my friend Mike Poinsett and each of our dates. Now, in that instance, I didn't see anything, okay? It was the night before my color belt testing in Waichuru Karate Do, and to be nice about it, my date was very reserved and not even interested in much conversation. So I excused myself, right, wrong, or indifferent, and I've taken flack about this over the years from different people. And I went outside of the car to practice my katas, my forms, because I had testing the very next day. And
Doing that on the date?
yes, I was doing it on the date. Well, she was into sports. I think she would have rather been on the soccer field kicking a ball around than been out with me at that point. I was outside the car working on my forms, and I heard a commotion over at my station wagon, 67 Chevy station wagon. And my buddy Mike was clumsily trying to get, excuse me, out of the car, and his fist raised like he was going to pound somebody. Now, mind you, it's peaceful, calm outside. I don't know what's going on, what's gotten him agitated, because he was having a good time with his girlfriend in the backseat of the station wagon. So it's like, what is going on? And he calls me over to the car and says, "You've been messing around the car." "No, Mike, I don't know what you're talking about." And now see, I knew Mike from drama class in high school, and he could be a joker. He wasn't joking at this point. The look on his face, he was real perplexed. He didn't understand what was going on. And I would come to find out that the three of them had seen shadows of hands. And Mike put his hands out like this, indicating a hand shadow this big on the passenger side of the car. I was on the driver's side of the car, okay? Which, in quick analysis of it, because when Mike's telling me, I'm like, okay, he's playing around. But when I got in the car, his girlfriend was about hysterical, and my date had a single tear coming down her cheek, and she's, "Can we please go home now?" I thought, okay, whatever happened really impacted these two. And, usually when Mike does something, he does it very out in the open and blatantly and then laughs about it. There was nothing being laughed about at this point. So I thought, okay, well, let's take the girls home. And as the evening progressed, I'm running through my mind what all the possibilities were, because even though when I was doing my forms, the style that I study, your arms are out and you're doing, different hand moves. And even though a couple of cars came by and it was dark, again, September 14th, 10:20 p.m., I stopped. I had my hands down. So in no way, shape, or form could it have been the shadow of my arms or hands against the car. And again, even if it had been, I was on the driver's side of the car, not the passenger side where they saw the shadows. So that wasn't the answer. And we took the girls home. We got them, stopped at a local restaurant, got them something to drink and calmed them down and took them home. They lived up North County, St. Louis, just north of 270, if anybody who's watching this knows what I'm talking about. Or you can check it out. And on the way back, Mike, of course, was perplexed. I was perplexed. And, when you're mid-teens, 17, 18, 19 years old, you feel invulnerable. You feel like you can take on the world, like you can, and he's a Golden Glove boxer. I'm a martial artist. We're going to go back there and we're going to find out who's doing this and we're going to, So we decided to go back to the park. And the Creve Coeur Park has 3 sections to it. We were on the section that was lakeside, where the falls are. There's a specific part of the area that has these falls, and the Indian legend of the Indian princess that, my Indian prince or whatever, and throws herself off of the falls, blah, 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 blah. So we're down there. And this time we took the car all the way down to the fall area. Before, we had been parked 3/4 of the way up from the falls. We went all the way down to the circular and parked. And parked, killed the lights, killed the engine, cranked our windows down about an inch to hear somebody was coming up on the car. And 2 or 3 minutes go by. When you're sitting there not doing anything, 2 or 3 minutes feels like 15, 20 minutes. And I was getting anxious because I needed to go home and get rest before the testing. And I started to tell Mike, I don't think, and he's like, shh, because he spotted something. There's a path over by the falls that leads back into the park. And he spotted something over there, some kind of a figure. And I can't quite see anything because my eyes were not used to seeing in the dark like his was. He was used to night hunting with his dad. So he's watching it, and he's watching it move along the perimeter of our area. And I can't see anything. And he finally gets frustrated enough that he's like, it's right there. And he points, and he's pointing up. His eyes are burning him a little bit, so he does one of these things. So with his arm up, I lean forward, and I trace his arm up, and I see between two trees against kind of a backlit night clouds. It was gray. This outline of this massive looking thing lumber between two trees. And there was actually a knot on the first tree that I could see where its head was right about there as it moved. And I immediately thought, need to go. Need to get out of here. Danger, danger, Will Robinson. So I start the car up. Mike's like, wait a minute, whoa. Let's see if we can get a better look. And against my better judgment, I think, okay, we're in, X number of tons of steel in the car and iron. We're protected. If anything goes down, I just have to drop it and gear floor it and get out of there. So I agreed to hang on. And of course, it's moved back into the density of the trees that I can't see it in the dark. And he says, it's right over there. And I think it's looking at us. Again, my mind realistically going, it's looking at us. It's now trained its attention on us. What happens if it attacks the car? What happens if it puts a dent in the car or crashes the windshield or something? How am I going to explain this to my insurance company? That's truly what I was thinking. And the key, something that will happen later on also, is he said, it's kind of swaying back and forth. And let me tell you, if you're ever out in the woods in the dark and you see a figure that's doing one of these, it probably has honed in on you and is watching. Now, what I was experiencing at that point was the fear that someone doesn't have any idea about what they're looking at might feel. I don't feel that way now. I've had enough experience with these beings. In fact, as of the shooting of this document, this recording, in the last month, I've had 2 other sightings of these beings. And again, they are beings. They're not, well, creature can be a generic term, but they're not animal like most people are led to believe. They're not.
What experiences have you had that leads you to believe that they are beings and not animals?
Because there are people out there. Now, I'm not one yet. I may become one. But there are people out there who are able to communicate with these beings and have been doing so for a number of years. I first started hearing about that 15, 20 years ago. And I thought, well, that's weird.
Psychic communications?
Yeah, psychic communication. And there has also been sounds recorded, guttural, some sort of vocalizations that have been recorded. A man named Scott Nelson here in Missouri, I think he's out of Springfield maybe, who was a linguist for the Navy when he was in, has gathered a bunch of these sounds, and he's almost been able to decipher a language out of these. But I just wanted to emphasize that now because what I'm relating is a fear-based moment of experience. I no longer have that. Now, I would not necessarily go out by myself at night because of these beings, as I've come to understand, there are some that are interested in bridging that communication gap with humans, but some that absolutely abhor humans. And, you know, when you consider what they've likely observed in their time of us, our behavior is not real pretty sometimes.
So you're saying there's some type of reasoning on their part as well, so that over time either they, like humans, develop hate for something or love for something.
You could even maybe go so far as call it a prejudice.
Okay.
Prejudging somebody before you know who they are. Okay. Many animals out there have a fear of humans, especially if they're wild animals. I don't know of a lot of cases where wild animals readily come up to humans and go, well, hi, you know, or I'm a turkey, gobble gobble, or deer, or any of that. Most of the time when you're out in the wild, if animals sense you, they'll go the other direction.
Now, do you believe, since this sort of a paranormal subject, do you believe they're living, breathing beings within our reality? Or do you maybe think they might be dimensional, as some people suggest?
They can be both. I mean, they definitely leave a physical impression on this, if you will, 3D reality. I mean, there's footprints, there's hair samples, there's dung, there's blood, you know, stuff that has been gathered from the field.
But analyzed properly.
And well, I won't necessarily say not analyzed properly, but the trick that you've got, and I think, you know, there's people that love her or hate her. Dr. Melba Ketchum out of Texas has spent 5 years on what is being referred to as a Sasquatch genome project, where they've gotten a variety of samples from the field from different areas of the United States. And many of them carry the same marker, which indicates the same animal, okay? And, you know, before this, that was the trick. You know, if you've gotten a field sample of whatever and you analyze it, as in our case, as I understand it, through working with a friend of mine, is that initial case in Creve Park took me on a 5-year investigation track in the park. And we did, in fact, come up with some field samples of hair and flesh and blood. And back at that time, of course, if you analyze something and it comes up an unknown, well, that's all it is an unknown. You can't say, oh, this is a Sasquatch because it doesn't match a bear. No, you can't say that because you have nothing to compare that unknown to. Where with what the Sasquatch Genome Project has done, has gathered samples from various places. And thanks to DNA research and being able to check that type of thing, they found similar traits in these various things. Okay, all of this has come from the same type of animal, an unknown. It's not a fox, not a bear, not this and that. So it's not a positive ID, but it certainly is enough there to say we have an unknown being that we're dealing with.
What has been your latest experience with Sasquatch, Bigfoot?
Well, very, very pleasant actually, because again, my situation, the last situation I was involved in, involving Creve Coeur Park was in '79, where I didn't see the creature, but the 3 people I was with did. And 2 of them, it scared them off. Friends of mine from college. And all of a sudden, I couldn't find them anywhere on campus. They didn't want to talk to me, blah, 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 blah. But recently, in the last month, for dating purposes here, I was traveling east on Gravois, Highway 30 in St. Louis County, off of 141, and daylight sighting along about 10:30 in the morning. And on the opposite end of the road, on the opposite side of the road, there's a road that went off, seemingly from my vantage point, into a wooded area, although if you get past the trees, there's a sports complex back there. But there was a white pickup pulling off of 30, going west, that pulled off on that road, and right as it moved, I saw something that had enough height to it that my initial thought was, oh, a horse. And it had a chestnut, auburn colored hair to it. And I think what made me initially think a horse was as tall as it was and the hair flying off of the body. But then as my mind is identifying it, oh, a horse, the other part of the mind is going, yeah, but the hair is all the way down this body. There's no backside to it. There's no tail. It's just tall and hair probably a foot long off of all of it. So that by the time I got done saying, oh, a horse, I'm going, no, that's not a horse. And before I could finish with that thought, it was gone. It was in movement, the same direction the truck was going. Now, I don't want to say disappeared, but it certainly went into the trees and that where I couldn't see it anymore. And I did double back later and go down that road, and that's how I found out there was a sports complex down there. There's no stables, there's no place for animals, not readily seen anyway. So I thought, after all this time, I've seen another one. And what the punctuation on that was that I was already planning on going with a new friend and colleague, Shell Dion, from over in Illinois, and her friend Rick Cruz, and her other friend David at the time. We were going to meet in mid-Missouri, essentially, because, okay, without laying the groundwork on it, Shell was being summoned over here to Missouri through her sister's connection with Sasquatch people because they needed to talk to her. Quick background on Shell. Apparently all of her life, she has had a connection and a communication of some sort with the Sasquatch people. She and a man named Freeman Young on Facebook have a group they call Tree Peekers, because apparently there are some Sasquatch that have the ability to do what's been referred to either as eye shine or eye glow, which when Shell and her people came over and I got with them, I was able to see and experience. And having seen the eye glow, I have a much greater appreciation for some of the pictures that they posted on Facebook. I've been a photographer since age 12. Okay, black and white, color, but we're talking back in the film days. Darkroom, developing, printing, all that. And when I saw these pictures posted on Facebook, I initially thought, with Photoshop being what it is, it almost looks like somebody put that there. Well, now having seen the eye shine, eye glow, I understand why it looks that way. And I'm sure if I tried to take a picture of it, I might wind up with a similar quality. Although I'm hoping that, in fact, with this camera that we're shooting this interview with, I'm hoping to get footage of these beings that will allow us to.
Talk a little bit about that experience. You don't have to disclose the location.
No, and for sake of what we're doing, I won't. Although I will say that Rick was amazed that within a short distance of where we had planned, well, not planned really, where we had our first encounter with these beings, we thought we were done with the night. You know, we were prepared to be out in the cold in the night until, well, however long it took, maybe till sunrise, you know, but it didn't take that long at all because they were expecting Shell and they made their presence known. And, you know, so I'm guessing we were done by like 10:30.
So she's been you're saying that she was in contact with them psychically, so that's how you guys knew to be at a certain spot, certain time?
Not exactly. Okay, Shell lives in Illinois. Her sister, who for sake of future actions, I will remain nameless at this point, lives over here about mid-Missouri. She was getting some sort of communication from these beings that they wanted Shell. They knew she was connected to Shell, and that they wanted Shell to come over to bridge the communication gap between them and her. Okay, and Shell, I've been in touch with Shell. I met Shell on Facebook roughly February of this year, 2013, and Facebooking back and forth, emailing back and forth, and finally calling back and forth. Most everything that she was telling me about her experiences and what she and Freeman are teaching and that kind of thing just rang true. I never heard her say anything that sounded fishy. So finding out that Shell was going to be coming over here and in such close proximity, because where she lives in Illinois is far enough away that it made going to visit her a challenge. Whereas where she was coming over to Illinois, it actually only wound up being like a little over an hour away. So I couldn't pass up that opportunity. I had to go meet this woman. There's a part of me that was just being driven that I need to meet Shell. And buzz, buzz, buzz. That would be my cell phone, but that's okay. And when Shell found out I was at location earlier, she said, "Oh, good. Well, you can scout around the area and find out where we might be able to try to communicate," which I'd never done before. I was at a Greenport Park. So I was like, okay, well. So we wound up, I found the only place that made any sense to where if we went there and we were found there, you know, late in the night, it wouldn't be problematic. Because I'm not one to trespass. I'm not one to, you know, do something that might incur the attention of the police. I have better things to do with my time than have to deal with it, something like that. So found a location, we went there, and within 20 minutes, they were in touch with them. So they did their thing. When we were done, we were en route back to the motel that we were at. And it happened that during the first encounter, Rick had when he made announcements of who all was here, he referred to himself as the Owl Man. And so this person that we were with, you know, we're driving down the road, and she's like, "Why did you announce yourself as Owl Man? What is that all about?" So Shell says, "Well, find a place down here off the road to pull over, and Rick will get out and show you why he calls himself the Owl Man," or maybe the Sasquatch people did. So we put completely random place. We pull over, he gets out, I get out with him because I'm wanting to be right in the thick of everything. And he starts making these calls because apparently his reputation is that when he makes these calls, if there's an owl within like half a mile, they'll hear him and they'll come. Well, no owls came, but more Sasquatch came. Completely unexpected, had nothing to do with the experience we had just a half hour ago. That's where I really saw some of the eyes shine. And after we were done with the situation and we got back in the car and went, Rick was commenting that he was amazed at how there seemed to be Sasquatch everywhere over here. We didn't have to go to a place where there had been signs. If you go in the woods during the day, there's potentially things done with trees, with branches that might indicate a habitat of Sasquatch. Didn't have to look for anything like that. You just pulled off a random place and boom, there they were. So that was probably the most amazing thing about that. Well, actually, I was exposed to the concept of the Chupacabra, I'm going to say either October or November of 1995. My late friend Bob Buck was the first one to bring it to everybody's attention here in the St. Louis metropolitan area. It was through back when we were having Illinois MUFON meetings. And Bob had gone on a couple of, I hate to use the term expedition because they're not really expeditions. They're more like tourist things. But he had gone on one to Puerto Rico the year before. And now, of course, at this point, news about the Chupacabra is coming more into the mainstream, for lack of better terms, or at least the paranormal mainstream. Is there such a thing as a paranormal mainstream? I don't know. Anyway, Bob had brought a faxed illustration of the creature that he had gotten from Jorge Martin from Puerto Rico. And he was showing it, and it just looked plain out weird. Almost like a bad design for a B-movie monster. And but then after Bob brought it to our attention, on the old Dreamland show, Art Bell was talking about it. And then Inside Edition did a short piece on it. So it's like, okay, this isn't just somebody goofing around. There are other sources talking about this. And I was given the opportunity to be the official videographer on an expedition going to Puerto Rico. It was supposed to be January, get backed up to February. But February of 96, I went down down to Puerto Rico, and we spent a week down there. The overall expedition was to seek out, I'm resisting saying what I would normally say, seek out new life and new civilizations. Yes, I'm a trekker. But to look at paranormal encounters overall. But the Chupacabra was really high profile when we went down there. And as I mentioned on the Monster Quest episode, day and night, whether it was on television or on the radio and newspapers, everybody was talking about the Chupacabra. And we had the good fortune to be able to go and interview the police department of Canovanas. We interviewed three eyewitnesses. What was her name? I can't think of her name right now. Well, Madeline Tolentino, her husband, Jose Augusto, and the first one. It's in my documentary on the subject. But these people, this what I came away from this investigation with was that this was not somebody's imagination. First off, imagination does not attack and leave animal corpses. Imagination doesn't have a physical impact on our reality. We were talking about Bigfoot being interdimensional, or what, you know. It's like, no, they're although it may be, it does touch this 3D reality that we're in. Just as the Chupacabra, this creature that's been assigned the name or the title Chupacabra. Chupacabra in English means goat sucker, okay? It's not an official, you know, in biology or zoology, when a new animal is named, it's assigned a genus, it's given usually a Latin name of some sort, a phylum, you know, a kingdom. It's put into this scientific category and has all these. The Chupacabra doesn't have that. The reason it was called a Chupacabra initially is because the first animal victims found were goats. And it was presumed, because of the blood that was found around the body, that this thing was vampire-like and that it had sucked the blood out of the goats, thus goat sucker. Well, turns out it's probably a very strong misnomer, misnamed, because the necropsy test results of Dr. Carlos Soto, which my late friend Bob Buck was fortunate enough to get on his third trip down there, and which is incorporated into the documentary. He flat out says, of all the animals that he's done necropsies on, some of them had a lesser amount of blood than should have. Most had a normal amount, but no animal that he's ever necropsied was drained of blood. It's not accurate. What is accurate is that this, whatever this creature is, had a profoundly unique, strange, weird effect on the animal, on the internals of the animal. We were told, Bob was told, that the animal never went into rigor mortis, or almost never went into rigor mortis. B, these animals would take at least 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10, 11, 12 days to begin decomposition. That shouldn't be. That flat out shouldn't be. The puncture wounds on the animals had no saliva in them. And I thought long and hard about that statement. And I think I may have come up with a solution on that. And that being that the animals found typically had a series of puncture wounds on them that would result in the appearance of having been bit 3 times or 6 times. Now, when people think of that, they're thinking of a typical animal attack, canines grabbing the animal, 2 puncture wounds, but no saliva in this case. Well, the Chupacabra has been noted by almost all the eyewitnesses as having 3 fingers, 3 toes, with claws, as Madeline Tolentino emphasizes in the documentary. Claws, not nails, claws. And so as I'm putting together this documentary and I'm going over this, no saliva in the puncture wounds. Thing didn't bite him. It came up and grabbed him. And the placement of the fingers is why they seem like they were bit in 3 different places. That explains no saliva in the puncture wounds. Now here gets the even trickier part. When Dr. Soto would do the necropsy, peeling across the epidermis layers and tracing this outer puncture wound, he would find that this outer puncture wound led to 4 other holes that led into the animal where there was no outer trauma. These 4 holes weren't caused from the outside going in. They were caused from that one puncture wound going in and furthering into the animal. And tracing that, it might trace to the heart, might trace to the liver, might trace to the stomach, might trace to the kidney, various organs in the body. And those organs where that hole traced had strips removed from those particular organs where the holes went. What in the world is that about? What instrumentation do you use to go through such a small, I think they said that they were 8 centimeters? I want to say 8. I may be wrong on that, but very small. What instrumentation do you have to put into that small opening and worm it around in the body and wind up going directly to an organ? Now, the average person doesn't know that. And I think even a seasoned, experienced veterinary, if challenged, okay, here's a pig. Take this thing and without any microscope, without being able to look where you're going, make that thing touch the kidney. Make that thing touch the heart. I think that would be challenged to do that. So how does this creature that seems to be a living, certainly moving, animated being of some sort, how does it even know? And this is a lot of these animals that were attacked on the neck. Like this thing came up either behind or in front and grabbed them and, doing something to them. How does this animal know? And now it is noted that it was supposed to have had an anteater type tongue, very long tongue at times. So let's say that that's what it uses. How does it know on entry where to push its tongue to go to these organs? How does it have a natural understanding of the anatomy of, we're talking, of course, goats, but we're also talking rabbits, we're talking bulls, we're talking a variety of both domestic and agricultural animals that this thing's attacked and done this to.
Puzzle to figure out.
Very interesting.
Now, how often do so there was a period where it happened regularly on 2-3 weeks?
No. This was going on throughout most of 1995.
Oh, I see.
And into 1996, probably throughout a lot of that. And I do remember that when I got back from Puerto Rico, that every Sunday night for probably 3 or 4 months, Sunday night was when Dreamland came on with Art Bell. They were always talking about this, always talking about it. It was that prominent. Now, I don't know if other news shows got a hold of all this information. You didn't really see anything else in the States, as far as I'm aware.
How did the people react in Puerto Rico and the law enforcement?
Well, it's interesting you ask about that because law enforcement handed it off to the civil defense. Within respects that make sense, because unless a law has been broken, which maybe kind of sort of a law was broken when you consider livestock being private property of somebody and it's attacked and killed, yeah, I'm sure there's some sort of a law that deals with that. But police resources need to be addressing, I guess, more mundane crime things. And that was what we learned the first day that we were down there on this trip, which was the week of Valentine's Day in 1996. In fact, in the documentary, when we're in the police station, there's a on the front of the officer's desk, there's a pink Cupid with his arrow on the front, so you can definitely tell it was Valentine's Day week when we were there. But that was one of the first things that we learned was the police department doesn't mess with it anymore, which became a mystery for us because the last day that we were in Puerto Rico, while we got a good long interview with the mayor of Canóvanas, Senor Alcalde Soto. We were trying to find the police detective that had allegedly had an encounter with the Chupacabra, a Detective Rivera, I believe his name was. And so the mayor's on the phone trying to find the detective when he finds out that the civil defense is dispatching a unit to a nearby area because of a Chupacabra attack report. So we were in the right place at the right time. We got to go with them. We all piled in our van. They're taking their official civil defense vehicle. We're following behind them. This is all in the documentary. And we go to location, and we understand that there were some rabbits that were attacked. Okay. Now, the reason I'm tying this particular story in with what I just said was that there were some kids out riding their bike on the street, and we're all converging on this. We got, our team. We've got Jorge Martin with us. We've got Senor Rosa, who was the mayor's official translator. We've got Senor Battaglia with us, who is the Minister of Education for Canóvanas. We've got all these officials with us. The civil defense, with the lights and we got everybody. So interesting.
I kicked it back.
Okay. We have paranormal things that happen here.
Sure.
So when you looked over there, it was just like, what just happened? And I saw the microphone unit going. It's like, okay.
I know we had our experience. But
so anyway, we got the lights going with the civil defense. So neighbors are coming out and wanting to know what's going on. And there were 3 neighbor kids riding their bikes around the street that Jorge went and talked to. And they said that the rabbits had been put in the trash can and put out. Now, the person that was in the house was not the owner. They were renting the house. The owner, Millie, arrived. So we did some talking with her. But here's the mystery. Okay, the rabbits were allegedly put in the trash can, put out on the side. These kids told Jorge that the police came by, opened the trash, took the animals out, put the lid back on, and took off. Wait a minute. We've been told by the police department of Canóvanas that the police don't deal in it, that it's the civil defense that deals in it. So who was this? Who was it in the police department that did it, if in fact it did, or who was it that was playing like they were police to come by and pick up this evidence and go off with it? Don't know. A mystery.
Did anyone ask the police department regarding that?
I don't have any idea. We were, again, this was, they were promoted as expeditions.
I see.
When they were really a way for the person organizing this to have free trips around the world. Okay? If this were a true expedition, we would have locked into this thing and we would have pursued this until there was nothing else to pursue.
Sure.
But we had to break away because there was other things that we were supposed to do. And it really annoyed me. We were that close. Millie was saying that the people were saying that the Chupacabra had been being seen in that neighborhood almost every night for 4 months. We should have planted our happy butts there. We should have camped out overnight, and I should have been able to get something on camera. But as it was, we weren't really there to be researchers. We were there to accommodate tourists.
Wow.
So.
Now you mentioned a few times that about the documentary. Do you have it somewhere where people could look that up and find out more details.
Absolutely. Well, they certainly can come to my website, not a slash, dms.com, which of course there'll probably be a link here somewhere around the screen that they're looking at. Or they can come where they're seeing us now on your website, and you'll probably have a link of some sort or have it available for viewing on this site.
I just thought maybe if you already had it out there, but it will be on there, yeah.
It is. Just look up, and they can find it by just looking up. They can do a search engine, Chupacabra, the legend begins, and they'll either find it come up on their browser through itsdms.com, or they'll find it on your site.
Great. Do you think the three different subjects, UFOs, Bigfoot, and Chupacabra, that they're linked beyond just being labeled as paranormal, but that there's some kind of connection between these three?
I think there are some indicators that there are some similarities. I hesitate to say that there's a connection, because I don't think that there's something connecting them like the inference might be, and just for clarification of that, let's say that you've got the St. Louis 4th of July fair going on. Okay, that's an event, and you've got Anheuser-Busch as a sponsor, and you've got Ralston Purina as a sponsor. Well, the only connection they've got is that they're both sponsors in this event, but the two companies have nothing to do with each other. Okay, and that's what I would liken this to. There are some indicators that say that some Sasquatch carry an odor with them, like sulfur, like rotten eggs, like something really foul, putrid smelling. Similar has been said about the Chupacabra. Okay, smells like a pig farm, smells like sulfur, smells like something chemical. Okay, so you can take these attributes and say, there's something similar here, but it doesn't mean that they're connected in any way. I know that there's a certain contingency of people out there that want to say big feet are alien. There's within a given geographic area, within a day or two of each other, there may have been a Bigfoot sighting, like for example in Pennsylvania. There may have been a Bigfoot sighting and a day later a UFO sighting in the same geographic area, or vice versa. Okay. To me, it's a leap to say one is involved with the other or one is connected to the other. But there may be some situation that they both use. If we go with the idea of dimensional portals or doorways or something, maybe they both use some sort of a traveling portal to get to that same geographic place. See what I'm saying? If you and I and three other people go out in the woods and we're just trailing around and we find what I'll call a Tarzan vine, and we all go, wow, cool, let's play Tarzan. And you take your turn and swing over, and I take my turn, and the other people, that doesn't mean that we're all connected any more than that transport way.
I see.
Okay. So, we have to dig for those details, because if we assume anything, it's one thing to postulate and to theorize and to test that. But if we assume anything to be a fact or reality that's not, we're hurting our research. We're going to wind up with a less than accurate conclusion.
I see. And Finally, do you have any closing thoughts on any of the three subjects, or maybe something else that was on your mind that you want to talk about?
Just that I'm going to continue doing this and bring the facts as best I can to the people that are interested in the subject matter. I don't expect everybody out there to suddenly go, well, like this movement with disclosure about UFOs. I'm going to tell you something. In my experience, I don't care who it would be that would maybe come on TV or whatever, the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States or whoever, and come out and say, yes, UFOs are real and aliens are real. You're not going to get everybody out there to go, oh, some people don't give a flying. They don't care. It doesn't impact their lives. I experienced that when I was working at Edward Jones and Company back in '86. I was my first time deep into MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and going on at work about the upcoming symposium I was going to go to. And I will never forget, her name was Mary Martin. She was the secretary receptionist for the video department. And she finally, I was on my soapbox. I was just going and going and going. And she finally laughed. She goes, who cares? And I was like, who cares? She goes, yeah. What if there are aliens? What if there are spacecraft? So what? And I thought, because she was like near retirement age and all that, I thought, okay, maybe for some people, it doesn't mean anything. Bigfoot won't mean anything. Chupacabra, how many times in a year do you think of a zebra? How many times in a year do people think of AIDS? Unless it has a direct impact on your life, you probably don't, give two craps about it. Okay.
That's true. Well, Joe, thank you very much for your time, and I wish you good luck with whatever it is that you'll be doing in the future, and I'm sure we'll meet again.
Sounds good to me.